Hey everyone, welcome to another edition of AI Insiders from AI Marketers Guild and Marketecture. And I'm your host, David Berkowitz, here with a guest for a subject I'm pretty passionate about, pun intended. And we've got Aditya Jain from Passionfruit, and it's one of these AI optimization dashboards and recommendation engines that I've wound up using and I've showed off in some of my AI training to make me look smart to other clients and attendees and things because they've got some terrific visuals there to understand how you're ranking in AI engines, and I'm here to learn and always just trying to keep up because I feel like as soon as someone comes out with some recommendation for what to do, it's like someone's like, no, don't do that. And I think it's a very confusing, murky space. But hopefully, Aditya, we want to make some sense of all this today.
Appreciate that, David. I think the layup in the end was exactly perfect. So the goal here, guys, is kind of break some of the noise that's in the market and try to show kind of what we're seeing. And this will be purely as educational as I can make it. And then what I'd like is, guys, while I go through it, I know everybody might have different backgrounds. If you guys have any questions or want me to dive deeper into anything I share, just make me pause. And I'd love to kind of dig deeper and make anything more personalized to anybody's personal problem statement with any of the points we discussed today. But to kick things off, maybe I'll just share my screen and dive right in. So, just for context, also an artifact I made on Claude, which I think is lovely. So, highly recommend. But just maybe to begin with a quick intro, guys. My name's Adi. I'm basically was a growth operator for the past decade. Turned founder. I did my undergrad and masters at Stanford. Passionfruit was our love child as our second company with my co-founder and I, where we basically run an AI marketing operating system for SEO and AEO. We basically marry kind of what we call marketing engineers in-house with um, our own AI tech stack and work with about 500 plus brands globally. And last year, about drove $1 billion plus in revenue for our clients and worked directly with a lot of these providers across Google, OpenAI, Anthropic, and Perplexity. So the goal for today's talk is maybe to share a little bit more of my hot takes that I have on the industry and what people are kind of pitching out there. And as much as it is about my thesis, I want to kind of share some blueprints that I think are really working for us internally that I think people can take home and maybe also implement internally within your orgs. To kind of dive in exactly into what my kind of comment here is that what we think in today's world is playbooks as a concept is sort of dead.
Mm,
What I mean by that is I think every agency you go to or every kind of marketer that you speak with is kind of selling the fact that they've sort of cracked this new playbook that will make you win. And that's what I'm trying to debunk today. And there are a couple of reasons why that is. The first core reason is every search that anybody does on any platform actively changes the next result it dictates.
mm,
So if you see the counter on the left, it's a live feed for how many searches are being done on AI search platforms just as of today. And we're already at 115 million searches. Each of those will mildly change the platform to change the next answer it gives you. And I know people say the answers are different across 30 different searches, but even if you run it on your own instance, every couple of days, you'll see a different answer that each engine will produce. But obviously, these platforms are important for us to decipher because the number of users on each of them is growing and scaling very, very quick. I saw at the start of this call, everybody's talking about Claude, but ChatGPT still reigns supreme in terms of kind of our commercial usage and where we really see a lot of revenue trickle in from. And then Google itself has made kind of major pushes here, but because a lot of this architecture is AI dominated, we see these change regularly. So what I'm going to kind of talk more about is how are these platforms changing and what causes the change? And then what we're talking about is how do you really create a marketing loop, which in the context we're going to talk about today is for GEO, But what I'd recommend is view more and more of your platforms in a similar limelight in terms of how you can run those loops on steroids to be able to drive your own data to feedback what changes you make for your next campaigns. And just for representative sample, one core belief that I wanted to show you here was we're running these live queries on the back end. And what you'll see is for the same query, the top tool that each of the 4 target platforms recommends is drastically different. And the core reason behind this is because each platform is catering to a different user base and is pulling from different sources. So, for example, Perplexity uses Reddit a lot more than Gemini does, because of which Reddit users are kind of early adopters to things, share a lot of kind of new insights. So, the platforms they recommend for top tools is drastically different than what a ChatGPT might show you, which focuses now increasingly on Wikipedia.
So
That's
I've
that.
got to ask already though, because one of the top things we're grappling with is how how consistent are the findings even on a given day within the same platform?
So it depends on how many sample sets you take.
Hmm.
So I think one shift is that a lot of platforms use API polls. That's where there's a very high inaccuracy between what they show versus what each of us would see when we use the front end. And then for kind of prompts that are not being dictated too often, you can do away with 10 to 15 searches and that won't change as much through the day. But for example, a hot topic, for example, even Claude design. If you see the review for Claude design, that would change drastically because it's a very, very hot topic within that same day. Because these engines are designed to provide opinions, not just surface results.
Hmm.
So depending on the topic, that variability is very, very high, even within the course of a day. So what I wanted to kind of focus on is what are kind of 3 core concepts that I think are misconceptions which are leading us to kind of take incorrect decisions in terms of how we operate. So the first piece is optimize for AI search as one channel. And the core problem statement here is actually each AI system has really different economic models that they operate under, which means they sell to 4 very different audiences, because of which they have very different data sets and very different ways to target each. For example, ChatGPT used to rank Reddit threads very highly when OpenAI was a partner for them. But Google is always focused on driving business to your website because that's where they could generate a lot of the money from. So they rank brand pages. Perplexity really focuses on authoritative content. They focus now more on enterprise sales. So they use what they call citation graphs. And that's become core. So one core concept here is you have to understand which channel matters for you most, and then accordingly start functioning on the core citations that those channels focus on for gathering their data. And that's your first selection. So depending on that, you should run and pull data from the correct AI search engines. The second piece that I think a lot of people have been going out and talking about is you need a brand new content playbook to win on AI search.
Hmm.
The thing that's very different is firmly we've been testing the same type of content we write, just having our feedback loop run differently. Well, what it means was earlier you would measure the success of your content from how many clicks it drove or how many backlinks it drove from a Google infrastructure. Today, you write the same helpful content for that same target audience. It's just that the systems you look for, is this working or not, is citations on channels like a Reddit or a YouTube or a forum, which then compounds into what you see on your ChatGPT or a Perplexity. But the core entity and the core physics behind what content you produce is exactly the same. There's a lot of jargon out there about comparison tables. There was jargon about LLMs.txt, etc., that becomes very popular every 3 months. There's a new wave of new advice that comes in. To be very, very honest, every large player's goal is to not change the way you operate in terms of how the internet works, but to find a way to understand the internet the best. So as long as you're targeting the right intent and pushing out the right form of content with just some basics in place, you're in a good position to basically be able to scale up your presence and really drive. And the last big, big cop out has been
Mhm.
citations don't drive revenue. And I've heard a couple of people across a bunch of podcasts really push this out where they say, track your citations, forget about revenue. This is part of the funnel that you don't need to measure, just measure citations, and that's branded presence you're paying for. Citations directly should be driving a lift in branded searches as well as a lift in your pipeline. And there are three ways you should be measuring this pipeline lift. So, first is ceteris paribus. If you don't see a lift in your branded searches, it means you're targeting the wrong queries that you're getting higher citations from. The second piece is from every channel you've seen a citation lift from, you should see a direct correlation of revenue lift from those channels. And revenue could be like signups or whatever kind of you're tracking as a proxy for some sort of conversion. And the third piece is overall, you should also see organic sessions from other channels or conversion on traffic you're driving from other channels go up, but your engagement rate on average across any single campaign you run should be higher. And you should be tracking this, otherwise, you're targeting the wrong query set. So, these three are core lies that I want to tackle and kind of what I think the next step should be.
And
If anybody, yeah, David.
I have tons of questions and happy to hear from others too. But just how much does perplexity matter right now? Like, what's your take on that?
Yeah. So I think Perplexity's business has changed drastically. They don't publicly showcase their user count.
Hmm.
But over the last 6 months, we've seen inbound traffic across our customers drop drastically from Perplexity.
Hmm.
So at least from the data set that I have and that we use, it's not very, very high. We still see for kind of really, really technical use cases, especially within research, Perplexity still has a very strong customer base.
Hmm.
So if you're in that industry, I would highly recommend. If you're in B2C, SaaS, or e-commerce, or kind of um, slightly mid-tier B2B,
Hmm.
I would not really focus on Perplexity as much today.
So then, I mean, for things like for people who are, researching things with AI, I mean, is it mainly ChatGPT, Gemini, Claude? How much does Grok matter right now? Like,
Yeah. So I think Grok, what we use primarily is for um, promoting ourselves more on Twitter.
mhm,
The model is so integrated, it's important to have Grok understand your presence and your brand because it's very, very frequently used there. And that's where you get a lot of citation data as well.
mhm,
So I focus on these four. But as I said in the previous thing, where you should be focusing on any channel you're seeing traffic trickle in from first before you go on a spray and pray approach, trying to understand all four and try to optimize for all four because each of them operate very differently and will tell you different stories.
mhm. Okay. Yeah. It's just great to get the latest because even now it's like I was wondering like how long does Perplexity stay as far as like one of the top things or even modern because I hear so much less about it as far as like influence goes right now.
Yeah, I think one thing is if you're selling to large enterprises, Perplexity is important because they have very good B2B sales.
Hmm.
And a lot of vendor selection has now moved to AI search engines. So Perplexity still holds strong value there.
Gotcha.
And one important thing I want to showcase was this is actually just on pace of iteration. But this is what happens when you're trying to think of GEO as slightly a static mechanism, where this is actually a client of ours data that I'm showcasing here over a 90-day period, where we were tracking ChatGPT and Perplexity. But we're seeing some inbound here, so we really focused on a couple of activities. And we got the client to really drive up visibility. They picked at about 15% overall visibility across a particular query set. And within 6 weeks ahead of that, they were back down to close to zero.
Hmm.
And the reason behind this is the model updated the source set, where a lot of the blogs we generated and new service level pages we generated no longer stood the test of time because Reddit became a dominant source for the insight, that the answer that ChatGPT was generating, because of which very quickly we lost all the visibility we tried to work for in the first 6 weeks. So this is what I wanted to kind of highlight in terms of what I'm going to talk about the system, in terms of how quickly these models change, which is why playbooks go out of importance very quickly. Like Reddit was important, then YouTube. Now you're seeing a pickup of Wikipedia, etc. So that's why I'll just dive into the next piece where I don't think playbooks are important. I think building a loop is very important, which has basically 4 steps: measure, attribute, produced, and detect decay for anything you have, output it. And 4 very simple steps. First, with measure is you need to be able to track on a weekly cadence. If you track on a monthly cadence, you are already late. What's your share of voice across any search engine you deem fit, be it ChatGPT, Perplexity, Google AI overviews, etc. Understand the queries that you want to track, what's relevant for you that could be driving revenue, what's not. Understand what's your movement over the course of a week. So which queries are stable, which queries are not. Understand what citations are really driving change here and how fresh is the content on each of these query clusters you focus on. So for example, if I'm looking for the best CRM software, generally they're using Reddit threads or G2 reviews that are that have been there for over 6 months. But if I'm looking at the best kind of shoe to wear for the New York Marathon, it's slightly more new. So you look at newer Reddit threads that are slightly more recent. Um, and that's where you really see how important it is for you to keep engaging on that thread versus an older thread.
Mm.
The second piece is really understand attribution. So for each of these channels, each of these citations, which one is what are the core KPIs you'll track to measure revenue for yourself within that? So either you directly measure from GA4 any AI referral traffic that's coming in to then make that your core KPI that you really want to drive to make a business case for it. The second thing we've seen a lot of brands do is actually measure branded search lift. So you can track on a Google search how many more branded searches am I driving every month and how much of that is really translating into revenue for me. The third thing a lot of people have started doing was measuring the number of the averaged engaged sessions and how much of a lift is that over the course of time, so that you can see if overall me building a higher presence is really driving better traffic to my website and making them stay on my website for slightly longer. So there are a couple of methods here, but it's really helpful to kind of continue making a business case for a channel that most people are struggling with justifying ROI from, aside from just overall brand presence. And then third is using these 2 data sets. What you should really start focusing on is what are the core things that you start producing. So if Reddit is important or some PR campaigns are important or some blogs are important, understand what's being cited to answer the questions on each of these engines, and accordingly just start generating those pieces here. And the most important thing here is don't generate those pieces based on keywords. So I saw this prompt. This is what I'm going to generate. Focus on entities. So for example, I'm going to focus on this ICP or this pain point first and create a wheelhouse of assets that I want to generate over the next 4 weeks or 8 weeks. And that's how planning should work. Generally, what we see is people will try to generate separate assets for 30 different queries that are targeting different personas. You basically don't make meaningful progress on any, because of which you don't really see any movement and then you start from scratch every new week. So it's better to kind of understand one entity first and really build production there. And then the last thing that I'd really focus on is every week you will see movement where some assets of yours were cited last week but have lost citation or have gone down. That's where you want to understand where are you seeing decay for any assets you've already pushed out. Those are your low-hanging fruits where you can easily just refresh those assets or re-engage on those posts to bring them up and automatically refresh them. So these are the 4-step process that I'd highly, highly recommend. And there are complexities within this that I'm happy to dive into and happy to take questions if somebody has on this. But by using these 4 simple steps, we've run this across different types of industries.
Mhm.
Um, and these are the type of results you can get to see in a very, very simple system where people have gone from 0 citations to driving 38% of the citations across their category in under 6 months across search engines. We've had companies just focus on Reddit as a category and be able to really, really build up their presence. People have used just Quora. People have really focused on just updating their schemas, building a YouTube corpus, and scaled up. So once you realize just what works for you based on what the AI search engine tells you, it's really easy to then kind of build a real engine where you spend 2 to 6 hours a week and really just be able to scale that up even without hiring somebody externally for that use case. The 4 kind of elements I'd highlight as important is choose a data ingestion layer. So this is like your typical kind of crawlers or tools like Profound. I think Otterly, David, you had on the platform on one of these webinars before as well. They're really, really good at these things. They help you ingest the data, connect with your GA, GSC, also provide you data on citations and stuff like that.
Mhm.
On the second piece, on the attribution piece, I think it's really important to use traditional tooling like GA4 or even use tooling that HubSpot and if you have Salesforce that they've built out for you to really be able to build that attribution funnel for yourselves and be able to understand what the core levers you need to move on. And on the execution piece, I think it's either using content writers in-house or using the data you have to hire kind of some agencies that focus either on a Reddit or on a YouTube to kind of find the core levers you want to move and hire experts that are core for each of those systems there. And I think that would be great.
And so, as we get into AI, to the content generation piece and using that, I mean, one of the things I've heard some very mixed opinions on is the role of using AI to create a lot of that content. And also, I've heard mixed opinions on how much human in the loop, ranging from 0 to lots, is recommended for that. Like, do you have some informed opinions on this one?
Yeah, 100%. I think like uh, a- as I genuinely think there's not a single correct answer. It depends on your industry. So for example, if you're writing just uh, best listicles for different softwares or different products, it's important to have opinion. If you're in a category like insurance, it's very, very important to have an author for your content.
Mhm.
But if you're also in like a CRM space or a very generic space where there's just a lot of content out there, being able to aggregate that content at scale and be that one source that's citing 10 other pieces underneath it is very helpful for any AI search engine because you are becoming that one source because they are all optimizing token counts on their end. So
Mhm.
if they can crawl one source to get 8 sources, they will always choose you over going through 8 subsources. So for every different type of piece, even if you look at the citations that are commonly being cited for any answer you look for, you'll be able to see that variability where you can see something is AI generated versus something is not. And that tells you what can work, what can't work. So that's why it's important to have human in the loop as a larger strategy where you have that mix. But everybody is doing a mixed strategy here. And if you just focus on humans generating every piece, you're most likely to be left behind unless you have the ability to spend on volume.
Yeah, because I mean, I've seen some surprising results even with some tests where like, and I mean, someone a while back had asked me for some content for some SEO requirements, and I'm like, let me see how good Gemini can be at putting this together, and and their opinion was like, we can't use AI for this at all, and I submitted some of this Gemini created content and they started ranking right away in the AI overviews. And this was like a really tiny consultancy. So there are things that like my own assumptions have often been tested and proven wrong here. But it's why I love hearing from someone like yourself who's so in the weeds.
Yeah, 100%. And maybe I'll, before I go on to the next piece, kind of talk about a couple of things. Uh, Lisa, this is definitely, this whole thing was generated on Claude Code. The point of AI slop is you can generate a lot of these things that look pretty as long as the data is correct. And this stuff digests. For me to generate this, sort of taken me over 2 days to come up with something like this. And the point of generating a lot of these using this is as long as your data source is correct, it serves the purpose. But yeah, as I said in the call out was this was generated on Claude. Um, the second question I think, Jennifer, you had was this, is GA4 within a Shopify environment helpful? We work with a lot of D2C brands. The core importance here is if your tracking on GA4 is set up correctly for Shopify, only then it'll work. Otherwise, you might see variability where your Shopify data is 30 to 60% off from your GA4 data. And that's where you have a lot of issues, especially when cookies is not enabled. So for attribution, I would first suggest getting a GTM set up correctly before you use only GA4 for attribution. And we work with B2B and D2C clients across the board. So our split is about 70% in e-commerce and then 30% in B2B. And Lisa, the way we measure AI ranking is depending on the different use cases we have for clients, we have our own tool that we use for which we've partnered directly with a lot of the LLM providers. But then some clients have their own tooling that they use. So like HubSpot has their own AEO tool that we use and plug in into, and then we use that data to verify citation data. Yeah, Paul. The reason why Claude is something we don't, I haven't spoken about here primarily is Claude is not an entity that's being used for commercial intent since they don't want to push out people out of the Claude ecosystem when they provide suggestions. So we haven't seen major uptake in revenue attribution coming from Claude just yet, which is why most of the commercial use case we focused on ChatGPT, Perplexity, and Google. For client websites, there are 4 core use cases that I would highly focus on. So first is whenever you see a citation that comes up, you can see what types of pages are being cited. So first is either you create a new page that you don't have, that's commonly being cited. Second is if you have a similar page, update it based on the most common trend you see on pages. So for example, in B2B websites, what we commonly see is people don't have strong FAQ sections, people don't have testimonials, G2 integrations onto their plugin pages. They don't have competitor comparison sections, which are very, very common. So that's a second approach where you update your existing pages to tack on those pages better. Third piece is within websites, people are really scared to write content on best use cases for my X product or compare their products directly with other products by writing best of guides. I think writing those guide pages, writing those best of articles are really, really critical for building out that presence on your own website so you control the narrative about your brand. And then lastly is there's a lot of back-end architecture around schema implementation as well as allowing the correct bots onto your website. And that's the core hygiene that I'd highly, highly recommend. So for example, generally most websites allow the traditional Google bot and then the standard crawlers, but they don't allow a lot of the ChatGPT bots as well as Claude bots, etc. So that's the first use case that everybody should update. And then the second piece is implementing the correct schemas across the website and the architecture so that any crawler that does land on your website can easily scrape through and go through the complete website. All good, Mike. Jennifer, can you give me an opinion and any experience with ads on GPT and how this impacts unpaid? Yes. So ads on GPT requires a minimum investment of 100K, focused on 2 plans, the free plan and the $8 plan. The companies that we've seen run good pilots on ChatGPT are the users that are targeting where their end customer is sort of at the bottom of that quartile in terms of how much money they're willing to spend on AI search. So a company that's done really, really well on ChatGPT ads currently has been HubSpot. And the way ChatGPT ads is working is they don't target the queries, they target intent. So across a very large intent forum, they're showing HubSpot ads, and that's doing really, really well for HubSpot in themselves. Unfortunately, I don't have data on how that's impacting unpaid ChatGPT queries and result behavior, just because the channel itself is growing so large, and currently we don't have enough data of which queries are actually surfacing ads or not, and that pilot is not that large just yet. So unfortunately, I won't be able to answer that question in terms of how it's impacting unpaid, but people are seeing very promising results on the paid forum right now. I'm just gonna answer Marshall's comment
Yeah.
for some pretty built-in analytics. Okay, well, Marshall, great. I think you answered another question on top, so lovely.
And just one of those things also for those, because like there's a lot at the intersection here of all this GEO AI optimization and vibe coding, which we've been talking about a bit. And like one of those useful things that comes up is like GA4 for sure, connecting your sites to that. Asking your platform or searching, like, does it have any connectors to Google Search Console, for instance? And to what extent can it proactively monitor and address some of the things that invariably come up, duplicative content and all these like and all these structural things that tend to happen whenever you're adding a lot to your site. And it's just like, being able to just use some of these some of these more traditional best practices, like in the past, I barely was ever on Google Search Console because I wasn't usually the one managing as much of this directly. Now, because of AI, I'm managing much more directly. So I have to learn the stuff that some people learned 10 or 20 years ago.
100%. And I think what we're seeing across the board is one tool is no longer sufficing any attribution or kind of team in terms of what their needs are. So what a lot of people have been doing is they're connecting their data across different platforms or even downloading that and putting it on to a singular platform to be able to understand the correlation and uh, across different channels to better inform decisions. So a lot of people are now using GSC, GA4, as well as the data they get from an LLM visibility platform to better understand kind of how is the full ecosystem working together and how can they, what's the next steps they should be taking across this. And I would suggest, I don't think GA4 or Shopify, etc., are like the single best use cases for everybody else. Depending on your hosting platform, be it a Webflow or a Shopify or a Framer, or if you have a lovable website, the platform that you should be using is unique to the system you've set up and where your end attribution happens. So for Shopify, obviously it's happening on your website, but some people have end attribution on HubSpot. That's what changes a lot of the setups that individually you need to evaluate and recommend. We'd recommend individually to focus on. So the one easy way I'd recommend kind of pushing out this sprint is that you can pick 10 initial queries. These should be buyer intent, commercial focused queries where either you've seen search trickle in from this, or this is something that you would imagine yourself searching for if you're looking for the product that you're selling. I would either manually run these queries across ChatGPT, Perplexity, AIO, and Gemini, and just see what the results you get. I would log those manually to see which ones are actually even relevant for us today. So if you see your like completely different competitors are coming up, that's never going to be an important channel for you. So only if you see that relevance, I would focus on that channel and then track what URLs are coming up, what was the answer. Use that data to basically decide what are the actions I want to take tomorrow. On Wednesday, just take a couple of actions from the top cited pages and the answers you saw. So be it a new page, you need to create a new content piece, you need to write whatever it may be. Just understand that and push that out. On Thursday, rerun your audit and see if anything changed. And I would recommend doing that again the following week. Every week, if you just spend like an hour or two doing this, it becomes a really simple process to start using and adopting GEO and understanding that better to see what's working for you, what's not. And once you do this for a couple of weeks, you'll be able to start seeing tangible results because these engines sometimes shock you in terms of how quickly they can change and actually show you being cited. And that's where I think we've seen kind of companies really be able to build up capabilities and really be able to scale their own presence and attribution from each of these channels.
So I guess my question for you, Aditya, thank you so much for breaking it down for me. This is definitely not my wheelhouse, but I'm curious to hear more about what are some of the use cases that you're seeing with your clients, whether they're B2B or B2C. How are they using this to help improve lift that you kind of hinted at before?
Yeah. So I think in e-commerce, in that space, what's really working for folks is creating new category pages that really target niche users
Hmm.
and pushing out content supporting those niche pain points or ICPs that they target, and then spinning up YouTube channels that use their social media content because YouTube is a very highly cited source.
Hmm.
For B2C SaaS companies, engaging with users on Quora, Reddit, and then doing targeted PR activities on commonly cited sources has been
Yeah,
extremely helpful. And then them creating direct comparison pages for each core competitor that a ChatGPT is citing has been
right.
extremely useful. And then writing
Smart.
product updates for core. Um, so generally we have service pages that show
Yeah,
for any user what their product does, but writing larger product updates that really go into the in-depth version of the solutions has been
yeah.
extremely helpful.
So it
For
sounds like big competitive research and then also for product research as well.
yes. And then for
For
large B2B companies, they are building heavy published content, which they used to hide behind paywalls, now
yeah.
direct for any crawler to come up, which is based on proprietary data, highly reviewed by their experts internally. And we are
Mhm.
co-authoring and co-publishing pages with top experts in their industries, pushing that out, and then really focusing on G2 reviews and their kind of outdated website architectures where they're opening up a lot of their documentation out to all of
Yeah.
these crawlers to come and be able to see it. Those are the
So
three.
So go
Yep,
ahead. Sorry. I'm excited. No, but it sounds like you're teaching your clients to be more open and to engage with their audiences directly from what it sounds like. They used to have more
yes,
closed systems, but now AI has forced them to be more, let's say, conversational with their target audiences.
exactly. Paywalls are no longer as helpful as they used to be.
What I'm seeing come up also is the role of traditional PR, more traditional sources. Uh, like, is this yeah, is this more ammo for bringing more traditional PR and like kind of elevating that to impact the LMs and brand reputation?
So I think traditional PR needs to be better guided with sources that are being cited on each of these channels.
Mhm.
So I think traditional PR focuses on your typical large publishers like a Forbes and and Times Magazine, etc. What we're actually seeing is these channels pick up a lot more unique individuals that are either could even be running Substacks or like 100,000 subscriber blogs that are unique to just the particular industry. And that's what we're seeing really play a big role in terms of shaping LLM opinion. So I think PR continues to be important. It's a rewrite of the strategy in terms of what PR you focus on and how you attribute success for that PR, where it's just not about getting it listed on a high visibility, high brand name channel.
Yeah, we had a question from Sandeep before I add the SEO optimization was linear with longer cycles. Any comment on what type of team skills and workflows you're seeing now?
Yeah. So Sandeep, on this, like timeline wise, what we are seeing with clients is you can generate uplift within 15 to 30 days at max. And that's the timelines I think every marketer should get used to in terms of how they're seeing, um, like just, I think any marketing channel today, just because of how quickly these platforms update. Like Google used to release an update once every year, then once every 6 months, and now they release an update almost every couple of weeks. And these AI search channels change a lot quicker. So that's the type of kind of core update cycles should be focusing on. And I think from a skill set perspective, I think first is just being comfortable changing the core metrics we evaluate is the first shift. But the second is having a larger wheelhouse of capabilities, because volume of and speed of content and pushing out changes is very, very important.
Mm.
So I think typical kind of quarterly review cycle where you create a strategy that you execute over 90 days and write maybe two pieces or like are just low volume outputs is no longer like feasible, just because everybody else is trying to operate at a higher and higher throughput,
Mhm.
and they're iterating their strategies a lot quicker. So I don't think you need to know coding, but I think being comfortable with that level of change and that level of agility is extremely important to actually win.
Excellent.
I have a question just in response to that. If a business is not able to update their website that frequently, would it be better for them to invest in being active on a platform like Reddit?
So Lisa, I think depending on the type of citation, so either it's a Reddit, it's a YouTube, or it's a Quora, or it's a G2, whatever that may be in terms of within the category that's important for you, definitely then work outside of the core website becomes really, really important. And that channel may differ depending on what the common citations are for your industry itself.
Thank you.
So, one thing you haven't talked a lot about today is multimedia. And obviously, but people are producing way more video content. How good or bad is that when you're trying to influence LLMs?
Yeah. So the way LLMs work on the core of their backend, what they're optimized for is to reduce token usage for each search they provide without hampering token quality.
Hmm.
So what that basically means is as much text as they can pull and as much pre-data that they already have been trained on, they can pull to answer the question, the more it'll lean on that. Only for use cases where it doesn't think it'll provide the best outcome for it will it try to do a web search, and then lastly, look for net new types of content. A year and a half ago, multimedia content was not something LLMs were really good at indexing and understanding. That since then has shifted drastically. And a lot of websites, including your YouTube, Instagram, they're providing transcription directly on the back end that makes scraping off this content a lot easier. So we've seen a massive uptick. We actually did a study with the YouTube team about how much YouTube as a channel has scaled up and how multimedia is playing a larger and larger role across the board. So what we recommend brands across the board to do is, even though multimedia content is not the biggest driving lever if you're getting started with GEO, but for example, if you have an issue like Lisa, you do where you can't update your site as much, or you already have one channel you're really pushing out a lot of content to, that could be an Instagram, that could be a LinkedIn, etc. Cross pushing that content across other mediums is your lowest hanging fruit to increase your chances of shaping your opinion across any LLM. And that dominance of this type of content will increase. And we saw this uptake be driven first with a lot of kind of self-help and kind of guides, where you see a lot of YouTube content already start flooding the market, where Google led the charge, ChatGPT followed suit very quickly. And we're going to see that adoption definitely scale up. I think this Lisa's question, is this an art, a science, or somewhere in between? I think this is definitely right bang in the middle, where I think there's a structural process to it. But the art really comes in terms of what you think is most relevant and what you think your core ICP looks like. But I do think like as LLMs get a lot more structured and there's a lot more data and consistency in their outputs, and they become slightly more public in terms of how they operate, it'll become easier for us to decode on a more consistent basis what our uplift and what the ROI from each of these channels can look like over the period of time. So for example, Microsoft released their AI search visibility platform last year in November. That really helped people understand and decode a lot of what Bing's behavior looks like. And as more and more platforms follow suit, it'll make it more and more of a science than just an art.
So what are the best ways to add sources to Notebook LLM?
Lovely. Okay, lovely. So what I always recommend is run everything on incognito. Generally, if there's a different geography you're targeting, run that geography as a VPN. So I think the question was, what are the best sources to influence Notebook LM?
To add the best apps to add sources to Notebook LLMs.
So what I do is I just run exactly this same query across all 4 platforms. I'll skip Claude for now just because I'll have to log in. But I'll just show you kind of representative examples of how it shows up. So what are the best sources to run Notebook LM? If you realize this did not default to web search. Generally, whenever it defaults to web search, you'll be able to see the citation sources. It's using its pre-pledged data that it already has. And then this is how it's gathered its resources. For this exact output, all it's done is it's highlighted the different sources it has for each. So I'll just wait for this full answer to load. These are the top apps. So what I just do is create a Google Sheet. I should not be working off this, but I will create a Google Sheet, list out the query I put Google Drive is number 1, Google Doc is number 2, YouTube is number 3, or just copy paste these 3. Go on each of the citations that ChatGPT used. And if you see 2 of the citations are both Google, then it used a platform called Bboom. I hope my full screen is still relevant.
Yeah.
This is a random source in terms of an article. Arjun Jha published this last year. So clearly up-to-date data is not as important for this. Has 0 comments, extremely reclusive source. Use Notion without any clear citation, Obsidian without any clear citation, and cited a couple of automation tools that I got from this Reddit thread. This Reddit thread has only about 22 upvotes and 1 comment. Posted about 24 days ago. I would do this same approach by gathering this data across Google, where I'll open up the Reddit thread, I'll open up this, and I'll open up this Reddit thread, and put down the different answers I saw for Google, as well as a YouTube video, right? And I'll do that same thing here, where in Perplexity, you'll see a lot more different documents and pull that same data. This is where a general crawler is slightly helpful, but I generally pull for some of the most common ones that I see that are common. And if you see the Reddit threads that Google pulled are drastically different than the Reddit thread that ChatGPT pulled. What I would do is, if this was something that I wanted to rank for and have my tool showcase, I would go in, understand what this thread is talking about, and actually just engage saying what I would recommend and why I would recommend that here. I would look at this blog article and try to create the same article on my own website, because I assume I'm selling an automation tool as well.
Mm-hmm.
For the Notebook LM help page, now I don't have the authority that a Google has, but I would understand the structure that they've created and see if my own source, if I can create an article about Notebook LM with the similar structure and the same depth that Google is citing, and cite Google's Notebook help page, as well as the Reddit thread, to combine them as sources and create a formal article that I own that's citing these 5 sources as a combined source for it. Similarly, this is the same thing for another Google page. This is the same page that we saw here that even Google has cited. This is a different thread. I would go in and engage on this thread. I now realize I can't recreate this thread because it has a lot of reviews, but I know that the r/notebook LM overall channel is extremely important for me. So I would live and breathe this channel and find 5 posts I want to comment on this week, and 5 new threads I'd want to start that's relevant to the threads that I've seen here.
How long before you can see results if you take this approach?
genuinely it depends on how quickly each of these platforms change. So for example, this thread is 6 months old. This thread is just 24 days old. That's how quickly it was cited. So I would assume on ChatGPT, you can change the opinion on ChatGPT a lot quicker. Then you'll be able to change the citation frequency on a Google. So directly how recent the thread it cites is actually how quickly is a proxy for you to actually start influencing the opinion for that channel. And to get 93 upvotes or 250 upvotes is slightly hard, but to get 22 upvotes and one comment is a lot easier.
Mhm.
So
Well,
that's how you understand the difficulty of it.
Yeah, and we're approaching time here. I mean, this is all terrific, and appreciate the real-time glimpse. What's the best way for folks here to follow up with you, stay in touch?
Yeah, I'll just drop my email and LinkedIn on chat, and happy to, and as well as Passion Fruits itself, happy to connect any way possible.
Amazing. Well, yeah, I've learned a ton. I mean, I think all this info, like for just like the best takes on GEO and AI optimization right now, we need as much as we can get because this is where brand reputation is and where it's continuing to go. So and yeah, they're like, I appreciate you starting right off with busting some myths out there and giving us some of the latest, very well informed thinking on this. So thanks for coming by. Appreciate everyone with so many great questions today. And yeah, look forward to seeing you all next week.